everyone, and welcome back to Mind Body Medicine for Chronic Pain. My name is Sean Hershey, and I am a therapist. I specialize in helping people use psychological and emotional modalities to heal from chronic pain. As I always say, most people don't even know that's possible. But here's the thing. You're here with us, so you know it is. You know it is possible. Okay, announcement before we get into everything. My Instagram. I kind of actually despise Instagram, but I am on there. And if you have not heard, I have officially changed my Instagram handle from My Gay Therapist to Mind Body Medicine for Chronic Pain. I am tightening ship, you know what I mean? I'm getting all my stuff to have the same name. And this is the message that I really care about, obviously. Mind, body, medicine for chronic pain. This is it. Why do anything else, right? When I can be doing this. Why do anything else? This is obviously the best. That's why I'm here. And hopefully that is why you are here too. So if you want to follow me on, on Instagram, feel free. I'm over there at Mind Body Medicine for Chronic Pain. So you may be wondering, why is the podcast episode cover for this, for this episode, a picture of baby Sean at age 22? Aside from the obvious reasons, like that my hair looks like perfectly windswept, I kind of look like a badass, the Empire State Building is in the background, and this photo is going on my Instagram. My newly rebranded Instagram. Why else though? Why actually? Why actually is this the photo? Well, today we are talking about it wasn't that bad. And we're talking about disenfranchised trauma. And this kid, or young adult, you could say, this young adult was carrying around a lot of that. And he really needed a change of lens to actually see his life clearly. Now, am I saying that I see my life perfectly clearly now? No, I am not. But I see my life much more clearly now at age 37 than I did then at age 22. And I understand my body and my mind much more now than I did at age 22. So we are going to get into that change of lens today. And we're going to get into that change of lens today for you. You know, we are doing this for you. On the topic of for you, a little note for you. All right. As I continue to record this podcast, and as you continue to listen and deepen your healing journey, and especially now since I'm talking about pictures of myself on my Instagram, I want to make this little note because this is very relevant for framing this podcast and the role that this podcast can play for you in your healing. So I wanted to say this because I recently came across a quote from a writer, Adam Gopnik. So Adam Gopnik describes the difference between a guru and a teacher, clearly painting the former as like a position to be avoided and the latter as like much better. So according to Gopnik, quote, a guru gives us himself and then his system. A teacher gives us his subject and then ourselves. Okay, I don't think the words guru and teacher are so important here. What's important are the concepts behind the words, especially because I do not mean to co-sign on a narrative. I mean, I think guru and teacher basically mean the same thing actually, and I do not want to co-sign on any narrative that a guru, which is a Sanskrit word, is bad, and a teacher, obviously a common English word, is good. You know what I mean. It's not about the words, it's about the concept behind the words, because both a teacher or a guru, no matter what you call them or what they call themselves, either can have positive qualities or some negative qualities. So, okay, again, according to Gopnik, a guru gives us himself and then his system. A teacher gives us his subject and then ourselves. I loved reading this, and I wanted to share this on the podcast as like an important note for me and for you. I can stress about this podcast, folks. Like, I can stress about this podcast. I love you all, and I love doing this for you. Like, I honestly really do. And you also stress me out. Okay? Like, I will stress out, like, I need to have the answers for all these listeners, and I need to tell them the right information so they can heal the right way in the right time frame using all the right techniques. You know what I mean? So, okay. Obviously, if you read between the lines of my, like, I need them to get it the right way, if you read between the lines of that, you can see it's not you stressing me out, it's me actually stressing myself out. But, so I'm sharing this with you because this helped me further clarify how I want to come across on this podcast, and I'm sharing this to help you understand how I'd encourage you to listen to and engage with this podcast. So, the guru. The guru enthralls and mystifies. The guru's focus is centers their charisma, personality, and their own system of belief. The guru's method is acts as a model of authority and often creates a secret circle or inner circle or cult of personality. The outcome is that the student leaves admiring the guru. Now, I do hope you all like me. Because, like, I'm a human with an ego, and I do hope you all like me. I want that. But that is not the purpose of the work I'm doing. It is not the purpose of this podcast. Okay? If you come away from an episode of Mind Body Medicine for Chronic Pain admiring me, and you come away not having much of an idea about what to do for you, no, not the goal. So, the t-shirt. The teacher demystifies and empowers. The teacher's method is focusing on repetition, perseverance, and coaching. The outcome is the student leaves with a better understanding of themselves and their abilities. That is it. That is it. And on this podcast, I talk about my own life a lot, and I offer a lot of myself, and I share a lot of stories from my life, and I'm glad I do that, and I like doing that. And if that like resonates with you, this is a good place for you to be. But while I do want to offer myself as a companion on this journey with you, I do not want to fall into like the negative role of the guru. I do not have all the answers for you. Okay? I don't. Your healing journey is not about me. No matter how great my little stories are or my little pictures are, um, if I'm helpful, great. Um, that is the intention. But your healing is not about your relationship with me. It's about your relationship with you. And I have guidance that I feel very confident in. I repeat things over and over. I sure do repeat things. I coach you through all kinds of iterations of course, the three pillars of healing chronic pain, the three pillars of this work that I feel very confident in. This is our subject. This is what I give you on this podcast. And you know the three pillars. You know, one, healing through psychological work. Two, healing through emotional work. And three, healing through patiently attuning to your true self. I give you that. In that, I am quite confident. I do not heal you. Even if you become my therapy client, I do not heal you. I can guide you. I point things out to you. I partner with you. I help you. I'm with you, and I'm on the side of your true self, which is different from being that, like on the side of your defenses, even though, of course there are no bad parts. So we honor the defenses, we honor those parts, but like we go forward with the true self. and I cannot heal you. It is literally not possible. You will do this for yourself. If you like me, if you don't, fine. If you like yourself, that is our goal. If you don't like yourself, that's okay. That's just something for us to work on. But that's what this is about. Your chronic pain healing journey is literally all about you. Cool? Cool. Okay, so today we are talking about it wasn't that bad, reconceptualizing your trauma. So, we're going to be looking at your life experiences, hopefully using a different lens. And in doing so, we're challenging the existing norms and frameworks in your head because those existing frameworks are manifesting internal conflict for you. They're manifesting fear of emotions. They're manifesting fear of your truth. And they're manifesting pain and symptoms in your body. Okay. Trauma is definitely connected to chronic pain. Not taking your traumas seriously, yes, definitely connected to chronic pain. Okay, so what is the difference between enfranchised trauma and disenfranchised trauma? The difference between enfranchised trauma and disenfranchised trauma is enfranchised trauma is when the person who experiences the trauma has that experience acknowledged by other people in their direct relationships and or in the broader community, has that experience acknowledged as a serious legitimate problem, and that person is seen as a serious legitimate victim or survivor who is worthy of attention, help, and resources. Disenfranchised trauma is the opposite. Disenfranchised trauma is when the person who experiences trauma does not have that experience acknowledged as a serious, legitimate problem. And that person is not seen as a serious, legitimate victim or survivor. And that person is not seen as worthy of attention, help, or resources. I'm going to give an example to help you understand this definition. The example is kind of triggering. So, trigger warning. We're going to be talking about sexual trauma. And this was an example so this example is an adult's responsibility to enfranchise a child's trauma. And this is an example from a child development class I took in graduate school. Um, Literally phenomenal. Best professor I had in graduate school by far. Her name was Dr. Ann Garrity. She was brilliant. Like, she was truly like a brilliant clinical mind. Ann Garrity in my MSW program, she was the type of professor. Um, Actually, she's the only type of professor I've ever had who's like been at this level. She only taught like probably a little over half of our scheduled classes herself because she was so like busy with other professional engagements and like teaching in other schools and teaching medical students and putting on trainings. All that. She had a big career. And so she had guest lecturers teach like a good number of our classes because she was like honestly too big to like do it all herself. That's how you know you're in a really good place in your career, right? Like, she was a badass. Um Okay, and just to note, none of the guest speakers like came close to being as interesting and as engaging as Dr. Ann Garrity. Like, just some people are just really fucking good at what they do, and Ann Garrity was one of those people. So, okay, she gave us this example, and it really stuck with me, and I'm going to pass it on to you. Triggering, sadly common. Enfranchised versus disenfranchised trauma. Here's an example to really seal it into your brain. A young girl, a child, lives with her mother. Biological father is not involved in daily life. The mother has a boyfriend who comes over regularly. The boyfriend sexually abuses the child. The child tells her mother. Here is where we get into the split between what is enfranchised trauma and what is disenfranchised trauma. In one example, the mother says some version of, "This is terrible. I can't believe it. I'm so sorry that happened. You are never going to see him again. He is never going to see you again. I am never going to see him again. We're going to get you to a therapist. This is not okay. You are precious. You deserve to be treasured and valued. You do not deserve this, and I love you. Okay? That is enfranchised trauma. Something bad has happened. Like, this is trauma. Something traumatic has happened. And the mother's reaction enfranchises the child and the child's experience. Okay, here's the other side. Boyfriend sexually abuses the child. The child tells her mother. The mother says some version of, "You're a slut. Stay away from my man." I think it's so shocking to even talk like this, but as, like, triggering as this is disenfranchised trauma. We're talking about disenfranchised trauma today because a lot of us with TMS and with neuroplastic symptoms, a lot of us with chronic pain, a lot of us have had some version of disenfranchised trauma. That's why we've learned to repress our emotions. That is why. That's why we've learned to negate what we really feel and negate our honest truths, because it started with the people in our lives. And it started with the communities in which we lived, the culture in which we lived. It starts with them negating what we really feel and negating our truths, and that becomes internalized. And now, you and me both, now we do it to ourselves. And now we're learning not to do that to ourselves anymore, because that is the healing. Okay. Um, so you can see how, like, trauma is gonna be bad no matter what. Like, trauma is gonna be hard, but disenfranchised trauma is harder. It is worse. Having the internal story, "I was sexually abused and my mom took care of me." Having the internalized story, "I was sexually abused." Well, you wouldn't even really say that. Having the internalized story, "My mom's boyfriend touched me and I'm a slut." Those are radically different stories, and they create radically different narratives and radically different senses of self. Okay? Story one, the enfranchised trauma, that's someone who's on their way to healing and wholeness. Story two, the disenfranchised trauma, that's someone who's dealing, they're in a position where they're lost, they're confused, they have a long road towards healing and wholeness ahead of them. And that road is going to involve a lot of identity renegotiation, a negotiation of their mom's inability to keep them safe and be an adequate parent, a renegotiation of why this happened, because it did not happen for the reason that mom said it happened. Disenfranchised trauma is a longer and more difficult journey. Whew. So that is why we are talking about this today. All right. So saying that wasn't trauma or it wasn't that bad, these are common signs of disenfranchised trauma. Saying or believing it wasn't trauma or it wasn't that bad. Common, common, common. And it is good for us to address, like, maybe that's true. For example, like, I went on a long walk with shitty little shoes, got a blister on my toe. It hurt, but, like, I'm fine. It wasn't trauma. It wasn't that bad. Like, that's true. There are small problems in this world. Not everything is a trauma. You know what I mean? So if that can be a little confusing, because if you're thinking, "Oh, it's not a trauma," maybe you're right. However, maybe maybe if you're saying it's not a trauma or it wasn't that bad, maybe you're wrong. And maybe that's one of your strategies for repressing your emotions, okay? And repressing your truth. So here's where I think it may be helpful to say to you, if you're saying it wasn't that bad, maybe, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe it was fine. Maybe it wasn't that bad and it was actually way worse. Okay, maybe it was way worse. So I'm going to invite you to think about what you have been through. Not me, not the stories you know from my podcast, not the girl in this example. Think about you, what you have been through. And if your trauma isn't validated, if you aren't allowed, quote unquote, to have the emotions you have about it, if whatever you've been through isn't allowed to be talked about, maybe it's not considered trauma in your family or in your community, or maybe it's considered honestly such severe trauma that it shouldn't be named. Maybe it's so stigmatized you feel you can't even talk about it, or maybe it's so normalized that you feel it shouldn't feel traumatic. Maybe you know how bad it was for you, but everyone else who was there seems to think it was totally fine. Maybe the perpetrators of your trauma are still in your life. Maybe the perpetrator is your husband. The perpetrator is your wife. The perpetrator is your parents. And you love these people. But if you're being honest, they also were the perpetrators of pretty major trauma for you. And no one ever talks about it. And no one even acknowledges that it happened, or no one ever acknowledges that it was bad. And definitely no one's ever apologized for it. You can hardly maybe even imagine a world wherein the perpetrator would apologize. Yeah, that would be called disenfranchised trauma. And that is hard. That is hard to carry. That is going to lead to more repressed emotions than enfranchised trauma. It is just going to. That, we know how this works. That's going to cause more internal conflict. And that's going to cause more chronic pain, right? Like that is going to cause more chronic pain and chronic symptoms. So it is good for us to know about disenfranchised trauma, and it's good for you to reflect on that for you. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of our understanding of trauma. Um, it's kind of obvious that trauma, like, experiencing bad, sad, scary, shocking, adverse events, trauma. It's kind of obvious that trauma causes psychological distress and psychological issues. Many people in many societies for probably many thousands of years um, have known and understood this surely to be true, like, because it's just kind of obvious. All right. The history I know and that like we carry with the word of trauma in the English language in the American context, like the US American context. The history of the American Psychiatric Association's definition of trauma, that's the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, they put out the DSM, which is like the Bible for making a diagnosis in the US in the mental health field. DSM 1, the first DSM ever published, this was in 1952. This was in the aftermath of World War II. DSM 1 included a diagnosis called gross stress reaction, which was inspired by World War II. Military personnel who experienced what was called combat fatigue or war neurosis. So the experiences of combat veterans, at least in this way in the DSM, were enfranchised into the first ever DSM that was published. While the enfranchising of combat veterans' experiences as legitimate continued, this diagnosis itself was dropped as subsequent versions of the DSM were published. In 1980, that was the publication of DSM-3. That was the first time that the conceptualization of post-traumatic stress disorder was introduced. All right. Dr. Judith Herman. Brilliant. Do people know Dr. Judith Herman? She is brilliant. She wrote what I would call the best ever text on trauma. This is an old school book. Published in 1992, her book is called Trauma and Recovery: The Aftermath of Violence from Domestic Abuse to Political Terror. This book truly is the best foundational text on trauma, if you ask me. In my humble opinion, it is the best. When I was getting my MSW and learning to be a therapist, Trauma and Recovery was the trauma text. This text has been replaced, I would say, by the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That book, The Body Keeps the Score, has become, I would say, kind of like the signature core trauma text in the field. And well, I would never say that like The Body Keeps the Score is a bad book. Nothing is as good as Trauma and Recovery by Dr. Judith Herman. Like nothing. So I want to give you a little bit of information from Dr. Judith Herman. I want to give you some quotes because this shit is powerful. Judith Herman wrote in her book, trauma must always be understood in its political context. Trauma must always be understood in its political context. Yes, I think that is completely correct. I could not agree more. Thank you, Dr. Judith Herman, for teaching that to me. Why is this true? Many reasons. But one important reason why trauma must always be understood in its political context is because some awful things are enfranchised. They are called traumas. When they happen, the people around you, like if it happens to you, the people around you believe that you are a victim or a survivor and that you deserve help and resources. Some awful things are disenfranchised. When they happen, the people around you don't care. Dr. Judith Herman was part of a massive feminist movement to bring to light the trauma experienced by women in patriarchal society. And to bring this to light as like it must be understood, the experiences of women in patriarchal society must be understood as traumatic. Judith Herman was a psychiatrist. She worked with countless traumatized women, many traumatized people of all genders. I remember literally getting chills when I read, as like a 24-year-old probably, in the book Trauma and Recovery. In the aftermath of trauma, the symptoms are the same. The symptoms are the same whether you were a soldier on a battlefield or whether you were a woman in a man's house. That just hits like that hits so hard that like her work was to bring disenfranchised trauma out of the shadows, the disenfranchised trauma of that women experience in patriarchal society out of the shadows and call it what it really is, trauma. All right, I'm gonna read you. We're on a kick. I'm gonna read you some more quotes by Judith Herman because she is a genius and she's a beautiful poetic writer. And her work, I feel, has kind of gotten like a little bit forgotten, which is a shame. It is a shame. So I'm gonna, for our purposes on this podcast, we are resurrecting some of this stuff because it's helpful. I really believe it will help you because it's so helpful. All right, here's a quote from Judith Herman. The ordinary response to atrocities is to banish them from consciousness. Certain violations of the social compact are too terrible to utter aloud. This is the meaning of the word unspeakable. Atrocities, however, refused to be buried. Equally as powerful as the desire to deny atrocities is the conviction that denial does not work. Sounds kind of like chronic pain healing, right? You can deny your emotions all you want, but the emotions are still there. Denial does not work. You can denial and bury your trauma all you want, but that denial and burying does not work. It's not a permanent solution. It is still there. All right, back to the quote by Judith Herman. Folk wisdom is filled with ghosts who refuse to rest in their graves until their stories are told. Remembering and telling the truth about terrible events are prerequisites both for the restoration of the social order and for the healing of individual victims. The conflict between the will to deny horrible events and the will to proclaim them aloud is the central dialectic of psychological trauma. Doesn't that sound like healing from chronic pain? Like take Nicole Sachs's work with Journal Speak. The conflict between the will to deny horrible events, the repressing of all the emotions. Doesn't this sound like Dr. Sarno's stuff? And the will to proclaim them aloud. That's the central dialectic of psychological trauma. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. All right. This is a real. I'm like, if you're sick of the quotes, I'm just gonna give you a little bit more because I think these are really good. Here's another one. In order to escape accountability for his crimes, the perpetrator does everything in his power to promote forgetting. This is why you experience disenfranchised trauma, is because this is how perpetrators act. If secrecy fails, the perpetrator attacks the credibility of his victim. If he cannot silence her absolutely, he tries to make sure no one listens. After every atrocity, one can expect to hear the same predictable strategies. It never happened. The victim lies. The victim exaggerates. The victim brought it upon herself. And in any case, it is time to forget the past and move on. The more powerful the perpetrator, the greater is his prerogative to name and define reality, and the more completely his arguments prevail. When traumatic events are of human design, those who bear witness are caught in the conflict between the victim and the perpetrator. All the perpetrator asks is that the bystander do nothing. He appeals to the universal desire to see, hear, and speak no evil. The victim, on the contrary, asks the bystander to share the burden of pain. The victim demands action, engagement, and remembering. Oh, so there's some really good pages out of Dr. Judith Herman's book. Disenfranchised trauma is powerful, and certain people benefit from certain traumas being disenfranchised. Perpetrators benefit from certain traumas being disenfranchised. So, what about you? What about you? I always talk in my podcast and, the stuff that I put out, I talk about being gay. And I talk about being gay in Catholic school. And talking about being like a gay closeted child has become an enfranchised trauma. That means I can talk about this relatively easily and people will agree and won't fight me. It's like they won't, they won't say things like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Although, honestly, not everyone would agree with that, and certainly there are people who would say, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." That is for sure. But, this trauma has become enfranchised enough that I can count on many people, like, understanding that when I just, like, speak this out, that I can count on people understanding, like, "Oh, yes, that is a trauma." And I'm bringing this up because I talk about being gay and, being a child, a closeted child, but it's in Catholic school, as a trauma in my life. I have had and have other struggles to deal with, and I've had other traumas and the such. And I've had struggles that aren't so socially sanctioned as these things, that I talk about very openly, which is why I talk about these things openly, because it's enfranchised. It's normal to talk about. I don't have to like second guess myself or be like, oh God, should I really say this publicly? Like it is normalized to talk about enfranchised trauma. Sometimes it's even like cool or like promoted to talk about enfranchised trauma, or you get like cred for being like I don't know, a victim. That people do get cred in certain circles for being a victim. So it is I wouldn't say easy to talk about enfranchised trauma, but it is significantly easier because it's much more socially acceptable to talk about enfranchised trauma. That said, I don't talk about everything on this podcast because I don't talk about disenfranchised shit. I don't wanna risk the, like, people not believing it, or I don't wanna risk being too controversial or, like, putting myself out there in a way that I don't want to do publicly, so, I keep, some of those things, like, private for me, and I'm saying all of this because maybe you have been through some traumas that are disenfranchised too. Maybe you downplay these traumas too. And not just publicly, maybe you downplay them to yourself. You downplay them in your own head, in your own heart, and in your own body. And maybe you disenfranchise your traumas to yourself. We are going to stop doing that. Okay. If you take one thing from this today, that is what to take. We are going to stop. Well, at least we're going to work on stopping, we're going to work on you stopping the disenfranchising of your traumas in your own head, in your own heart, and in your own body. Okay. On that note, I want to just earlier on on this season of this podcast, I had a really great conversation about minority stress with another gay therapist in Brooklyn. His name is Dustin Oliver. You can go back and check out that episode if you hadn't heard it. It was great. It was a great one. Very fun conversation. In that episode, I mean, this is very related to enfranchised and disenfranchised trauma because in that episode, Dustin and I talked about the ACEs study. ACEs, that's adverse childhood experiences, have been shown to lead to poor health outcomes, physical health outcomes, as well as mental health outcomes in adulthood. So the ACEs study, the original, was conducted between 1995 and 1997, and the adverse childhood experiences they chose to study in that they measured were 10 types of childhood traumas. 1, physical abuse. 2, verbal, emotional abuse. 3, sexual abuse. 4, physical neglect. 5, emotional neglect. 6, parental separation or divorce. 7, parental substance abuse. 8, parental mental illness. 9, domestic violence. And 10, having an incarcerated household member. Now, yeah, they got a good list of traumas, right? Like those things are going to affect a person. By naming these traumas, they are thus enfranchised. Naming them does not fix them. It does not treat the trauma, but it does enfranchise the trauma, which is important because that means it's taken seriously. So I remember first coming into contact with the ACEs study when I was younger, like probably in like high school or something. And I remember like not really getting into it or not really even knowing what it was talking about. But I remember coming into contact with the ACEs study again in graduate school. And I remember it so clearly. Like I remember the classroom I was sitting in, and I remember looking at this list of 10 traumas. And I remember thinking, well, one of my biggest traumas, which is being gay in an unsupportive environment, doesn't count. Damn. In that moment, what I was feeling is like my trauma was very disenfranchised. I didn't have that language, of course. So what I really thought was some version of I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And of course, the classic, it wasn't that bad. Okay. So I'm asking you, where do you feel this? It wasn't that bad. Where do you feel this? I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And then I want to ask you, is that what your body really feels? Is that what your true self really feels? If you really feel into your emotions, is that what you really feel? Do you really feel that it wasn't that bad? Because maybe it's a blister on your toe that lasted a couple days and you're fine. Maybe it was that bad. Maybe you're right that it wasn't that bad and it was worse. Maybe it was way worse. And maybe that's what your body is holding on to. And as I walked out of that classroom that day, I was left with the nagging feeling like, but it was bad. So therefore, if the trauma isn't really real and doesn't really count, but like something's bad and something's wrong, but that's not really a trauma, the problem has got to be me. Right? Wrong. Wrong. But that is what I thought, on first brush with this. Now, I brought up the conversation with Dustin Oliver about ACEs. I posed the idea to Dustin Oliver, like I posed the idea, like, don't you think being gay in an unsupportive environment should count as a fucking adverse childhood experience? Because I was like, I actually feel like it's an adverse adult experience to see this study everywhere and to have one of my own biggest traumas like boxed out of this fucking thing. And Dustin, this it was such a really, you should go back and listen because Dustin actually took this in such a beautiful direction. Like, he was like, being gay is actually the best thing that ever happened to me. And being gay isn't an adverse experience. It's actually the best experience, to which I can only say, amen, amen, amen. Same, same, same. Being gay is the best. For other queer people out there listening, all my friends in the LGBTQIA plus community, um, and some of you aren't my friends, but that's okay. We're still all in the same community together, and it's the best community, right? It's the best. Um, and if you experience trauma along with the fabulousness that you also get to bring into this world, if you experience trauma as a queer person, I just want to say to you, like, yes, believe yourself. If you feel that you have been through trauma, don't believe me, believe yourself. If you feel you have been through trauma, then you have. Okay? If you think you haven't been through trauma, but you have all the signs in your emotional life and the chronic pain signs in your body, then we have to investigate that because you might have to start believing that. Okay? I am not going to be able to do that for you. Like I said, I am not guruing you. I am teaching you. Believe yourself. What is your body saying to you? Okay. Yes. So our goal today is we are looking at your trauma through a different lens. Hopefully that's starting to happen as you're listening to this, so we can help you heal from chronic pain and chronic symptoms. All right. Current DSM diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. We left off with DSM-3, which came out in 1980. That was when PTSD was first introduced as a concept. Now we are at DSM-5-TR, which stands for text revision. And the current DSM diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder are as follows. First, exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. That already rules out a lot of people who have experienced trauma. I'm giving this definition because this conceptualization, is incomplete. I'm giving this because this is what is currently enfranchised by the American Psychiatric Association as counting as trauma. Yeah, this certainly counts as trauma, but this definition is incomplete. So, okay. Exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. That's one. Two, intrusive symptoms like nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive distressing memories, etc. Three, avoidance symptoms like attempting to avoid the memories, the thoughts, the feelings, avoiding external reminders like people, places, things that arouse distressing thoughts or feelings associated with the trauma. Four, negative alterations in cognition or mood associated with the trauma in the aftermath of the trauma. Five, alterations in reactivity, such as hypervigilance, angry outbursts, or like an exaggerated startle response, etc. Current symptoms of PTSD, there they are. If you resonate with that, okay. If you don't, also okay. These conceptualizations change. Know that. Trauma must always be understood in its political context. Always, 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 always. Your trauma may be enfranchised by others. Your trauma may not be enfranchised by others. But what we have to look at is, what are you feeling emotionally? What are you feeling physically in your body? That's what we're paying attention to. That's how you know if you've been through trauma or not. You take that cue from your internal world, not from the external world, okay? Okay. The way trauma impacts the human brain, that may change like very slowly, maybe over like thousands of years as the brain develops. Um, but the way that the way trauma impacts the human brain doesn't change that much. And it certainly does not really change within one lifetime, that's for sure. However, the way we conceptualize trauma, what counts, what doesn't count, what's a real problem, what's not that bad, that changes quickly. That changes from day to day. That changes from DSM to DSM. That changes from person to person who you talk to. That changes from culture to culture. That changes from household to household, family to family. So we are lengthening the list of what counts as real to enfranchise you, even if just in your own mindset, because that will help you. All right. In an effort to lengthen the list of what counts as trauma, I've done this on the podcast before. We did this in a previous episode. Dr. David Clark's list of trauma symptoms. Um, yeah, I don't remember what the episode was that I did this. Like, we're at a point now where there is enough episodes that I'm like, I don't remember what they're all about. So we're gonna go back into this because I love this, and I personally relate to this, and it's for people with chronic pain. And it's important to bring more people into the fold, and to understand that physical symptoms, as well as mental health symptoms, like quote unquote symptoms, are possibly related to trauma. So, Dr. David Clark, mind body physician, gastroenterologist, author of the book They Can't Find Anything Wrong, president of the ATNS, co founder of the ATNS, that's the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms. Dr. David Clark has a list of typical impacts of childhood trauma. These are not the PTSD criteria. They're pretty different, actually. These are characteristics he has observed in his clinical practice, in his exam rooms, in patients who have childhood trauma histories. All right, I'm going to read the list. This comes from Dr. David Clark. Believing you're a second-rate human being. No matter how hard you try, you'll just never be as good as other people. Having emotions that need to be repressed so you can get through your childhood. Low self-esteem. People-pleasing. Having no answer to the question, what do you do for fun? You don't do things for your own enjoyment. Instead, you do things that are constructive or useful. You give 95% in a relationship and you only get 5% back. You believe that what you endured could have been worse or it wasn't that bad. Would you look at that? This is what we're talking about today. Believing that what you endured could have been worse and it wasn't that bad. Believing you don't deserve to put yourself on the list of people you take care of. If you learn that someone in your life or someone you know was experiencing some child in your life or some child you know was experiencing a childhood like yours, it would make you sad or angry on behalf of that child. And, of course, unexplained chronic physical pain. If you relate to that list, let me just say, those are trauma symptoms too. And let me just say that I relate to that list too. That's for fucking sure. Oh, okay. So as we're winding down, if you all are getting into the idea of disenfranchised trauma, and if this is resonating with you, I want to say to you, I want to encourage some, I wouldn't call it homework, but some like leisure. What do you call that? Like there's like the required readings. This would be a recommended reading. I would say this is some recommended listening. You should really listen to Monica Lewinsky interviewing Tarana Burke. The podcast Reclaiming with Monica Lewinsky. This episode, I will have it in the show notes. recommended listening. March 18th, 2025. Tarana Burke, you probably know her name. She's the originator of the Me Too movement. And she shares very boldly and vulnerably of herself in this interview. It is really worth a listen. If you're feeling inspired by any of this, like if you're relating to any of this, Tarana Burke and Monica Lewinsky. Monica Lewinsky, you probably know who Monica Lewinsky is, right? The woman who needs no introduction because you have already heard of her. But you don't know who Monica Lewinsky really is. You only know one thing about her. Everyone in America knows Monica Lewinsky's name. And while we've got a big international audience on this podcast, I'm willing to bet some of you know Monica Lewinsky's name too. I basically learned what sex was from the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton scandal in, what was that, 1997, 1998. I basically like learned what penetrative sex was from Monica Lewinsky. I fucking love listening to the Reclaiming podcast with Monica Lewinsky because like just knowing what she has been through. Holy fucking shit. Like, and now she's just out there fucking reclaiming her her life and her name and her legacy. And I'm like, fuck yes. So, okay. Recommended listening. Her interview with Tarana Burke. The two of them are actually friends in real life, and so it's fun to like listen to them talk together. And there's a really great section in the middle of the interview where Tarana Burke talks about seeing Bill Clinton, walking through big public events as though he's a fucking rock star and doing a public tour for his book when his book came out, whatever that book was. And on the tour, he lamented how much money he had to spend to deal with Monica Lewinsky. And Tarana is basically in tears in this interview saying, like, if that man did that to my child, Monica, I would be hunting that man down. Monica Lewinsky was in fucking hiding after that scandal. Who is the real villain? Who is the real villain? Bill Clinton, of course, is in the position of being very enfranchised. Monica Lewinsky was in hiding. She is like newly sort of, well, I wouldn't say newly, but like it has taken, I've sort of followed her story because when I got into the podcast, I was like, let me do some research into like what's gone on in Monica Lewinsky's life between like, 1999-ish and now. She has gone through so much bullshit and it can be, I mean, it's putting it so lightly. Like her life has been, I wouldn't say destroyed because her life is not destroyed, but her life has been just like, what word do you even use? But it can basically, I would say, all be boiled down to disenfranchised trauma. If we go back to the first example that Dr. Ann Garrity gave me that I'm passing on to you of what is disenfranchised trauma, what is like poor adult mediation of trauma, Monica Lewinsky is a little girl who everybody called a slut and who everybody said, stay away from my man. Oh, man. Man. And Tarana Burke's story, she shares her history of sexual trauma and her process with starting the Me Too movement. And she talks about on this podcast, I mean, truly, this is recommended listening for y'all because, like, if you like this, you're going to like that even better. She talks about how much she repressed her story, how much she wanted to, quote unquote, move on and act as though, like, that little kid who was sexually traumatized, that little kid is gone now. And she's an adult now, and she's a different person now. But this is just so like lovely. Tarana tells a story of like wanting to work with young kids, and that truly felt like her life's work calling. And the kids she was working with, professionally, many of them were going through, you guessed it, trauma. And in the interview, she tells the story of like how these kids wanted empathy from her. And Tarana reached a point where she realized, I can't give empathy if I keep cutting myself off from my story. And because she was so motivated to be there for others, she decided she needed to face herself. And how much did that act change the fucking world? I mean, of course, the Me Too movement wasn't allowed to go as far as it obviously needed to go, and sexual abuse of women is still alarmingly normal, but Tarana created a movement. And that movement changed the fucking world because she had the strength to say, me too. And then the actress Alyssa Milano picked that up and it went fucking viral. And that is what happens when disenfranchised trauma becomes enfranchised. It changes the world. It changes the world. Monica Lewinsky was 22 years old when her relationship with Bill Clinton started. 22 years old. Bill Clinton was turning 50. I did that math a couple times on a couple different websites because I was like, is this real? I've got to get this right for my podcast listeners. Bill Clinton was turning 50. Monica Lewinsky was 22. That's why I chose this photo for the cover art of this podcast, because that was me. That's me at 22. Possibly 23 because that was all that one year, but I do think it was 22. I had just moved to New York. I was a child. Look at me. Looking at that picture, I'm like, what? My memories of my life at 22, I'm like, how was I allowed to like go out, like to bars, to clubs at night without an adult chaperone present, much less have a job? A job where I was entrusted to take care of children. I had my job in the Bronx when this photo was taken. That is me, age 22, on my friend's rooftop, East 10th Street in the East Village. And I was carrying around a lot of disenfranchised trauma. Gay marriage was absolutely not legal yet at that time. I was pretty unaware of a lot of things at that time. I was so desperate just to be a real adult. And yeah, this is the age that Monica Lewinsky was when all that shit started in her life. Children. Fucking children. Oh. So I'm just saying all of this to say, believe yourself. What if everyone sides with your perpetrator? Believe yourself. What if everyone loves your perpetrator? Believe yourself. That is disenfranchised trauma. You know, if everybody sides with your perpetrator and everybody loves your perpetrator, you know what that person is really like. You know a side of them that other people do not know. You know more than the rest of these idiots know. And I don't say people are idiots because people are actually idiots. People just don't know. They don't really know your perpetrator. They don't know. They don't have all the information. Believe yourself. Don't believe me. Believe you. Believe your body. Believe your emotions. You are right. Okay, folks, that is it. You are healing your chronic pain. You are doing it. You are healing. You will figure out, number one, what psychological work works for you. You will figure out, number two, what emotional work works for you. And you, number three, will attune to you. And I will see you next week. If you're looking for a therapist, you found one. And you can decide. Does my vibe resonate with you? Therapy is an opportunity. Therapy is an opportunity to tune into you, to learn to feel more comfortable being yourself, to feel more comfortable with your emotions, and to feel more comfortable existing in the world in your body. Do you have difficulties in your life? Maybe it's chronic pain, maybe it's something else. Maybe you want to become a person who likes yourself. Do you want a therapist to help you? And would you like me to get to know you and to help you? That is actually an option. You can find me at SeanHershey.com or MindBodyMedicineForChronicPain.com. Both go to the same place, and if you're looking for me, I'd welcome a message from you. SeanHershey.com, MindBodyMedicineForChronicPain.com, and you can request a free consultation.